Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled People stories. In this video, a neighbor Karen set my garage on fire because I refused to let her park on my private property. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one starts like this. I see a lot of stories on Reddit and whatnot about these crazy Karen neighbors, and while my neighbor can be a little entitled sometimes, I never thought she would stoop so low as to do something like this. So I've been neighbors with Karen for a good number of years, long enough to get to know each other in a passive sense. I've always done my best to be neighborly, and when I see Karen coming home with groceries and the like, I would always pop over to give her a helping hand. Not because she was old or anything, she was about middle-aged, but because we were neighbors and it felt like the right thing to do. Whenever Karen needed anything, I would always do my best to accommodate. I would not say no unless I absolutely had no choice. I lent Karen tools and equipment to tend her garden, and I would let her have a cup of sugar when she ran out and could not get to the shops. You know, those sorts of little things that let you know that you have a good neighbor on your hands. I used to think that we had a good relationship, not close by any stretch of the imagination, an amicable one of trust and remote friendship. Sure, she would behave a little entitled whenever I helped her out. A thank you was always the last thing to come out of her mouth, and the gratitude was a little forced at times, but you cannot judge a book by its cover. You never know the battles some people have had to face, so I always let it slide and did not let it affect my good neighborly attitude. Now, moving on from that a little, every man has his den. Some might only have the corner of a room or a cupboard under the stairs, if they're Harry Potter I guess, and some men have garden sheds or entire rooms to convert into their man caves. I had my garage. When we first moved into the house, there was no garage, just like every other house on the block. We had a small driveway big enough to fit a car, but no garage. After spending a couple years saving up, I was able to convert a part of the house. It was only a small utility room and a good portion of the side entrance into a decent-sized garage where I could stash all my tools and equipment, and there was even enough space for a workbench. The garage effectively became my workshop, and I was proud of it when I had built it. I'm a carpenter and I love playing with wood. Every couple months or so, when I've saved up enough money, I will get some timber in that I can play with. I've made benches and tables, desks, chairs, drawers, and all sorts of stuff for people that needed them. Most of the time I will donate the stuff I make in my spare time to charity shops. Needless to say though, my garage became my sanctuary. Well, a couple months ago, Karen catches me as I'm dragging the bins to the curb. She tries to make small talk, something she's not very good at, and it's clear that she's after something. After brushing through a few atypical small talk subjects, the weather, sports surprisingly, and local politics, she finally gets to the thing that she is after. She tells me that she's going away on a cruise for a few weeks to a couple months. To which I reply the usual polite affirmatives and non-probing questions, asking her who she is going with, where they are going, and the like. I'm expecting her to ask me to feed her cat or goldfish or something, but no, she asks me if she can park her second car on my driveway while she is away, because she doesn't want to leave it on our street. Now, if I had not had my garage there and constantly using the driveway to spread out a little, I would have been more than happy to let her use my driveway, but as it stands, I need constant access and the space. I tell Karen as much, and the faux friendly demeanor drops in an instant, and I see a side of Karen I had not really seen before. She had hinted at this side of her several times, and I should have guessed at her self-entitlement from the lack of appreciation when I helped her out, but when I told her no, she went full Karen. She threw out childish insults, and I felt like I had just slipped into the Twilight Zone or something. The moment was so surreal. I never thought a grown middle-aged adult could be capable of such childishness. "You never use the garage, I never see you in there, it's always locked up," and on she went. Like I would change my mind because she was being aggressively obtuse towards me. She stormed off to back to her house, actually stomping her feet as she went, and told me that she was going to make me regret saying no to her. That I was a bad neighbor and she was going to tell the whole block about me. I would not be able to find a single friend in the whole street. I watched her stomp off, dumbfounded and wondering if my significant other had spiked my drink or something. I was not too worried about the empty threats of a child. I went on with my evening as usual, comforted by the fact that I had CCTV set up and alarm systems in place. You kind of had to when you have a flimsy garage full of some of the more expensive carpentry tools, including a lathe. So if Karen did try anything, she would get caught out. I think it was a couple nights later, I wake up in the middle of the night to the sounds of sirens, and that was when I could smell the smoke and see faint flickering light. I look out of my window, and to my absolute horror, my garage was on fire. Not just a little bit, but a full blaze that threatened to catch on the house. I rushed the family out front just as the fire engines got to the scene in quick order. They were dousing everything. One of my neighbors who lived opposite of me was standing out in their garden and came over when they saw me, informing me that they had been disturbed by raccoons in the bins and they saw Karen sneaking around my property. They thought it was me or my SO until they saw Karen dart back to her house. A few minutes later, they saw the fire on the side of the house and called the fire brigade. I could not believe that Karen actually went out of her way and set my garage on fire in the middle of the night while me and my family were sleeping. Luckily for me though, the police were on the scene by the time the fire brigade put out the flames, and I spoke to them telling them what my neighbor had seen. I also had CCTV, which clearly showed Karen sneaking out of her house, jumping the low fence and disappearing around the side. Moments later, the telltale flicking light of a building fire. The officer wasted no time and immediately went around Karen's house to make an arrest. About a week later, the court hearing is in full session and my lawyer is absolutely ripping Karen apart, not that she had to try too hard. The evidence and witness testimony was irrefutable. What really irked me was that Karen did not show any remorse whatsoever. In fact, she tried to justify her actions by blaming me for not letting her park on my driveway. I could not believe the cheek of her. She said that she only wanted to burn a little corner of it to teach me to be a good neighbor. I think the judge was just as bewildered as I was at this botched attempt to excuse her actions, and I think the only thing Karen gained from this was a much stricter sentence. It was over in less than a day thanks to the evidence and testimonies, and Karen got sentenced to 15 years in state prison as well as a $50,000 fine for damages. Strangely enough, the neighborhood has become a lot quieter since Karen's incarceration. The next one is titled "Stalk Me into the Bathroom on 3 different occasions? Say hello to the police." And by the way, if you have watched until here, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and like the video, since that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. Hey everyone, I'm gonna get straight into it. As the title suggests, it's pretty straightforward, so this guy does something I suspect to be bad and I take the risk to confirm this and then get the police involved. Recently for work, I've been traveling between towns quite a lot. Sometimes on the way home, I would stop in to use a public bathroom on the way home. This was all well and good until over a month ago when I needed to use the bathroom again. The urinal was not for a single person, but one of those long basin sort of urinals that many use at once. I approach the urinal and soon after I get to business, this old man enters and stands in the urinal too. And well, begins doing what I couldn't possibly think he could be doing. In other words, jerkin the gherkin, cuffing the carrot, buffing the muffin. The first time around I chalked it up to perhaps an easy misunderstanding, but as with how you process things in a situation you've never encountered before, you're more likely to think, surely not, right? I quickly wash my hands and leave. Only a minute or so after returning to my car, I see him leave the bathroom, enter his car, and then leave. Thank God he did not see me and my car. This man would stand at the far end of the urinal so that when you're washing your hands, you had to be right behind him as he did the nasty deed. The second time I visited this place, a few weeks later, I went and used the stall for good measure, but surely he wouldn't be here again, right, on a random different day? Well, sure enough, I leave the stall only to find him there, right beside the basin, facing the urinal doing this thing. This time I swiftly wash my hands and get the hell out of there. Both of these times I remained completely calm and did not change my attitude or demeanor other than wanting to get the heck out of there both times. Making matters worse, these toilets are right beside a playground and there are heaps of children. It's actually a lake park, and I realized that seeing this guy on 2 very random occasions could suggest that he does this very often and that I'm not the only person to have had to deal with this. It is always the third time, right? 3 strikes and you're out? Well, it was a risky thing to do perhaps, and also maybe not the smartest, but I'm still glad I did this. It got results. So another couple weeks later I pulled over to make a phone call. I remembered his car and I saw it there. This time though, I did not need to use the bathroom, but I decided to spring a trap. I really wanted to report this guy, but a part of me didn't want to be wrong and I initially had my reservations. Given this happened 2 times on 2 random days quite far apart, I must not have been the only person to have to deal with this, unfortunately. I then left my car and approached the bathroom and I saw him sort of pacing around in the parking lot. He turned his head to look at me and did nothing, but unbeknownst to him, since I didn't move my head in his direction and I was wearing shades, I noticed this. If he acts now, I know he has done it with intent. I walk into his stall, counted to about 7 and then flushed. I was nervous because despite being relatively fit, sizing him up and figuring I could take him on if things got ugly, when I shut that door I would not know where he would be in the bathroom or what his intention may be. I wanted to get it over with fast, but still give him time to enter. As I came out from the stall, sure enough he was doing his thing. I washed my hands just like every other time and then left. While washing my hands, he cocked his head back a little and was watching me the whole time. Creepy guy. As I walked into the parking lot, I looked back and checked that he was still in the bathroom and snapped some pictures of his car. Once I got back to my car, I made another phone call, the police, to report his actions. About 2 minutes into the call, while I'm on hold, I see him enter the car and drive off just like last time. Perfect, that is his car I took a photo of and I've got a lead for the cops to follow up on. They sent a call out to dispatch and within minutes I already saw a cop car driving past. Could be coincidence, I like to think not. Much later that night, a cop phoned me telling me that they had paid him a visit and they confirmed that he was certainly a suspicious character. The cops told him if they received any further reports, he would be, cannot remember how she paraphrased it, standing/eligible for prosecution or something along those lines. I contacted a well-known community page for the area who made a post calling for people to speak up if they noticed anything suspicious in the area, no names, keeping it vague. Soon after though, people were talking all about similar encounters and situations just like mine. From what I understand, more people are stepping forward to make reports now. The visit from the cops, I hope, has deterred him from doing this again, and if not, at least it will provide more leverage moving forward. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. So I got my first career job in a local government keeping tabs on its real estate and the legal documents relating to said real estate. I'm wet behind the ears, my first 40-hour per week career job. This was a time when multitasking was a huge buzzword in business and it seemed every single job I applied for required someone with good multitasking skills. I thought it was BS. I worked best when only working on one task at a time and managing my workload via a daily allotment schedule. So that is, I would schedule my work in 15-minute lumps when I got in the morning and then work on those tasks. That way, I never missed a deadline or had a project fall between the cracks. For example, some tasks got slotted 2 hours, some whole days, some just 15 minutes. I love to keep my desk clean. All tasks that appeared in my physical inbox were sorted and prioritized. The paperwork was then filed and the tasks scheduled for later that day or later in the week, depending on how urgent it was. Consequently, my desk was always empty, save one folder and a few maps related to the folder. Once one task was done, that folder and its maps were filed and a new folder and its maps were retrieved. One afternoon, my direct boss walks in, looks at my desk with its one folder and 2 maps, looks at my clean-topped filing cabinets, looks at my empty inbox, physical one you actually put paper and folders in, then grunts and then walks out. 20 minutes later, my boss strides back into my office, drops 18 inches of folders and papers onto my inbox, states proudly and firmly, "Worker, it doesn't look like you have enough to do. This should keep you busy." He smiled and strutted back to his cluttered office. It was busy work. 3 weeks of mind-numbing paperwork, nothing outside of my work description, just more like duplicate files, old contracts, unorganized paperwork and/or outdated maps. In dealing with the dump's aftermath, I learned my lesson. While doing my actual job was important, it was equally important that hard work appears to be happening so I could do my actual job. I started saving old files, old maps and old legal documents. I rebound up papers that normally would have been recycled into legitimate looking folders. I transformed my office into a duplicate of my boss's chaotic file and paper hellscape. My inbox always had papers and folders in it. Height and number would vary daily, never empty though. I had folders piled on top of the file cabinets, folders in stacks on the floor. 24 of those white office boxes packed with files towering around my work area. everywhere. I even had a map rack with old maps rolled up in it. My office looked utterly cluttered. I even took to walking everywhere with a steno pad, a file folder, and sometimes a map under my arm. It did not matter where. Getting coffee? Pad and file. Pooping? Pad and file. Pointless meeting? Pad. 2 files. Actual necessary and productive meeting? Pad, relevant file, relevant map. Every morning, right after scheduling my real work, I would shuffle the fake folders and paper around my desk and work area, then move the boxes about every 2 weeks. But in all that visual chaos, I kept one area of my desk clean where the real work happened. One day, my boss peeked into my office, the door bumping into a stack of 3 full white boxes placed behind it, preventing it from fully opening. A single file fell off the top, spilling its guts all over the floor. He looked around, paused at the mess he just made, and then, "Oh, sorry about that. What are you working on?" I rattle off 3 of the highest priority properties on the current week's schedule and the tasks for each. "Alright, I will give this to someone else," and walked on down the hall. I had already completed those tasks. And yeah, ripe stars, now we will move on to the Am I the A-hole story for today. When my mom died back in 2018, she left me and my siblings a decent chunk of money and her house. My siblings wanted to sell the house and split the money. I wanted to keep the house. It's a unique property with a pretty big lot in the middle of the city. The house is huge, it has a pretty awesome deck, and most importantly, it's not in an HOA. I had some sentimental attachment to it, but mostly I thought the house was better for my situation than a pile of cash. I asked them if I could buy them out. They were pretty excited about the idea. The house would stay in the family and they still get their cash. We got it appraised, hired an attorney, and went through with it. My portion of the inheritance and a chunk of my own savings were enough to cover their shares. As soon as it was done, me and my then fiancé moved in. We saved a bunch on rent, the house was paid off, location was great, we were really happy with the house. My brother burned through the cash in 2 years. He fancied himself an influencer. He bought a Maserati for cash, went to expensive nightclubs, vacationed in exotic places. Good for him, but the money is gone. My sister and her husband bought a really expensive boat. I guess that's better. They did use it pretty often, and my nephews love it. But from what I understand, her portion of the money is gone too. I got married and we had a son. We would host my siblings on holidays, and the Christmas before the pandemic I started to notice it. They were making snide comments about how much the house must be worth now, and since 2018 we basically had an influx of people to my city. It's growing rapidly and the price of the house essentially tripled. We have had a bunch of all-cash offers on the house when we were not thinking of selling, but this year we decided to move. My wife was pregnant again and we were gonna relocate closer to her family. I then talked to my boss and he said the place we were moving to had an office I could commute to on the days I work in the office. So we put the house on the market. It sold pretty quickly and that's when the trouble started. Both of my siblings think that I owe it to them to split the profit I made, because it's supposedly only fair. We were in the middle of a move and house hunting in the new place, so I didn't really have time to go on about this. Well, it's been months and they have not stopped bothering about how I cheated them out of a portion of their inheritance and that I was being really selfish. They point out that the process of me buying them out was pretty smooth and we did not have any problems or hiccups. They did me a favor by not kicking up a fuss. Now they want to split the profit because it was their house too. This has become really toxic and most of my family is on their side. My mom's sister says it would have broken her heart to see her kids fight like this and I should split the money with my siblings. My dad's sister thinks I should buy them off so they shut up. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for refusing to split the money? And here, ripe stars, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you think OP is being the a-hole here or not? I would say he definitely isn't, because he hasn't done anything wrong or illegal, but let me know what you think. Either way, a comment on Reddit said, "Not the a-hole, it's not your fault that the house is worth more now than when you bought out your siblings." I would point out that all 3 of you invested in your inheritance in different ways and yours is the only one that paid off financially. Comment number 2 says, "Not the a-hole, repeat after me or face a lifetime of this BS over and over again. I'm old and I learned the hard way that leeches only ever demand more and more and come to feel entitled to and resent your success no matter how much money you give them. You should say, we each got the same amount of money. You both made the adult decisions to spend your share. I kept my share invested wisely. No one is entitled to the proceeds of my investments, just like I'm not entitled to a third of your boat or your luxury car." The proceeds from my good financial choices will all go to my children, as I'm the adult responsible for their care. No one will take away 1 cent from my kids' college fund because other adults made poor financial decisions. We all started with the same amount of money. You could have all bought houses, stocks, etc. with your shares. You chose not to. No one else is responsible for your choices but you yourself. Moving forward, I don't expect this to be an issue ever again. The next time someone tells me that they are entitled to my children's money will be the last conversation I have with that person. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I'm a long-time lurker but never had the opportunity to post a story about an entitled Karen until now. So I went to the grocery store one night and during my shopping decided that I should go and buy some beers. It was a pretty empty shelf but I managed to grab the last 6-pack they had. Later, when I was checking out, I was chatting with the worker and talked to them about there basically being no beer and me finding it funny. Turns out they did not get their last shipment due to a truck problem. This story is about a Karen though, so right behind me in line a woman perked up when hearing about the beer I had. Karen, you're the one that took the last of the beer, right? Give it to me right now. I deserve it and you haven't bought it yet. That clearly means I can claim it for myself. Me, wow, you must think you're something special to try and force me to give you something like this. Maybe if you asked nicely I would have, but no way I'm going to do that now. Also, based on your glazed eyes, I would guess that you've had enough to drink. Karen, F you, give me my beer or I'm gonna make your life miserable. Me, well you're making my night miserable right now, so I guess mission accomplished for you. I finished paying and went out to my car to go home. If you cannot already tell, I don't like to put up with people's crap and call them out for it. On the way home, I notice a pretty fancy and expensive car following me. I only live about 5 minutes away, but I start making unneeded turns and going up and down every street. Sure enough, the car keeps following me and I find it very unnerving. I park my car in front of a random person's house and lock the doors. It's a well-lit area and I just want to take a minute and maybe call the police. Not even a minute after stopping does the person ram their car right into the back of mine. I jolt forward but luckily have my seatbelt on and don't get hurt. I look in the mirror and see Karen herself getting out of the car and walking over to me. Fear is gone and replaced with anger, and I also get out to see the damage and yell at her. The rear bumper is ruined and just for reference, I don't have the nicest car, but it gets me where I need to go. Weirdly enough, she is the one screaming at me about the entire thing, despite the fact that my car was not moving and she was following me. Karen, look at my car, you're gonna pay me for this. And also give me that beer, maybe then I won't call the cops and have you arrested. Me, are you out of your mind? I'm not paying you a cent for the crash you caused. You are the one that crashed into my parked car. Karen, I'm calling the police. You have no idea who you are messing with. I'm a millionaire and they will believe me. She then actually does call the police, saying I smashed into her car and stole from her. When they arrive, they actually think my car is hers because it was clearly the one that got hit. She tells them that she wouldn't be caught dead in that piece of junk and points out her car, which has a broken front light from the impact. Officer, so you're saying he hit you? The damage does not really make sense if that's the story. Karen, well, he did. He was jealous of how much money I have and wanted to attack me. Then he stole beer from the trunk of my car. Officer, sir, did you take beer from her car? Me, officer, she followed me all the way from the grocery store. I bought the last of the beers and she started throwing a fit. Then she hit me with her car and called you up. I can show you my receipt for the beer in my car. The police didn't want to see it and were not buying a minute of her story. None of it made any sense anyway, and they were mainly going to do an incident report for me to send to my insurance company. They made sure to get her insurance information and give it to me for when I filed the claim for the repairs. She was yelling about wanting me to pay for her car repair in cash, and they told her that my insurance was not gonna cover it and I didn't have to give her anything. Due to the nature and seemingly fighting over beer, the police wanted to do a breathalyzer test on both of us. As I had not been drinking, I was fine taking one, and it came up that I didn't have anything in my system. Karen, on the other hand, started throwing a fit about it, saying that she was not gonna do a poor people's test. She supposedly made enough money to buy the department and they should just write in the notes that she was sober and take her word for it. They basically gave her the choice of doing the test and being let go if it was within the limit, or getting arrested and having to get tested at the station because they suspected she was drunk. She finally took the test and was well over the legal limit when it came to driving. They told her she was gonna be arrested and she did not take that news well. She ran over to my car and started punching and kicking it, screaming that it was my fault and taking steps towards me before police got her under control. I could hear her saying that the limit didn't apply to her and that they had to check their records to see who she was. She really felt the law when it came to drunk driving did not apply to her and I was still the one in the wrong. Once she was taken away, the rest of the police staggered away and I was left to drive home with my broken car and get it to the shop the next day. I was shaken up and ironically drank one of the beers this whole thing was about to calm my nerves. I'm a firm believer in not letting Karens get their way because it just encourages that kind of behavior in the world. I also believe though that if you are getting mugged to just give them the stuff because your life is more important. With this in mind though, if I was to go back knowing all of that would have happened, I think I would have just given drunk Karen the beer. I was without my car for 2 weeks and even though I did not have to pay, it was still an inconvenience. I'm curious to what you think about this situation. If you knew what would have happened, would you have kept the beer like I did or let the crazy Karen have it and avoid the car wreck? And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.